Right, good evening, brothers and sisters. It's quite a lot of work, these two. I've aimed for slide 30, and with the amount and with the folks struggling with load shedding, I'm going to go through them quite quickly. So moving on to our first slide, just to say there, every country has different laws and how organizations must operate and how they must be structured. But especially with international treaties and business standards, we know that there's a lot of similarities from country to country. I mean, okay, there will be some difference. I'm sure North Korea and the United States have very different laws, but nevertheless, there are a lot of similarities, especially in the global market. Sadly or gladly, a lot of ministries around the world are not registered with their governments. I'll say also perhaps gladly. Once again, I don't think if you were in Iran, you want to register your church. I don't think that would be a very good idea. But in most countries, churches are registered. And because all registered organizations are considered to be juristic persons, if I got that word right, means they operate as separate legal entities, sometimes also called artificial persons. So the company is like an artificial person. Okay, and it's vitally important to have an understanding of what it means to have an organization, whether you need to register or not, to understand how an organization must be run. And all churches, it's a good idea to know the laws of your country and to keep up with the changes. So, a big thing with churches, for-profit and non-profit organizations, there's a difference. And the main difference is that for-profit organizations have owners and shareholders, that they own the company. They've usually invested or they've bought into the company, and they're looking to make a profit. So that's basically a for-profit organization. It's people trying to make some money. And non-profit organizations, on the other hand, have no shareholders, and you can't buy shares in a non-profit. The organization is established for the purpose of benefiting a community, not making a profit. And following from that, therefore, while for-profit organizations have to pay tax, non-profits are exempt from tax, unless you've got things like sales tax and so forth. For-profit organizations will speak about a profit and a loss, whether the company made a profit or loss, and we speak about, in our non-profits, a surplus or deficit, because we're not trying to make a profit or loss. And of course, for-profits will be governed differently. There'll be rules contained in the government articles in most countries. Non-profits are required to operate by way of a constitution. Like our church, we have a constitution. Directors for profit companies are paid directors' fees. And if you want to break that down, you can go and find out the difference between an independent director and an executive director. If we weren't so pressed for time, I'd spend a bit of time elaborating on the differences between the directors. But for us, importantly, non-profit company directors are considered to be volunteers, and they don't get paid for being a director of a non-profit organization. But importantly, you can be paid for other functions. And our example in the church, for instance, pastors Ken and Gavin and so forth, can be paid salaries for performing a function within the organization. For-profit organizations hire staff who are paid and receive benefits, like me and Daniel, because you work for a for-profit organization and we get paid our salaries and benefits. But since non-profits normally rely on volunteers, but they can have paid employees too. Now, the organizational culture, the culture of an organization. When we speak about a culture, it's the customary way or the traditional way of how people think or how people do things within an organization. It's the way people think and the way people act. It's the way people share values. And naturally, a church will have its own very distinct cultural organization. And you can go on and speak about countries, denominations, church to church. You can make it complicated, you can make it simple. But definitely in a church, we have our own organizational culture. And organization can also be evaluated in terms of its values, its behaviors, and its structures. So we can look at how an organization has different values, what they value, how they behave, how they structure themselves. I think that much is pretty simple. And when we get to values, you can go on and make telephone directory length lists. I know at my work with values, eventually we resorted to voting on them because, I mean, people can throw out values by the hundreds, but important values are, for instance, the fair and just treatment and pay of an individual within an organization becomes very common and probably common to each and every one. Interaction between how the leaders and the subordinates, how the managers and the employees, I think that will differ from organization. There will always be branch to branch, department to department. That one can vary quite a lot. Expressions of accountability and authority to create trust both inside and outside. So expressions of accountability. Boy, what's it? The game of pass the hot potato. So how accountable people are. Definitely you can judge an organization about how much accountability the people take. In Christianity, a church, we are encouraged to take a lot of accountability and the authority to create trust both in and outside the organization. And boy, we could, if we weren't pushed for load shedding, we could elaborate. Articulation of long-term visions, how the church puts forth its vision. People perish for lack of vision, the Bible says. So a vision, it's definitely a key value of an organization, its vision, what it's trying to do, what it wants to do in the world. Opportunity given for everyone individually, what opportunities we give. Definitely people will absolutely be affected about what opportunities they have within any organization. Work for everyone at a level consistent with their potential capability. Are people being given jobs they are able to do? I'm going to go into this a bit more later on, so I don't want to jump on it now, but it's one of those things with the body has many parts. So definitely in the church, there's an overlap with that kind of thing. Opportunity for everyone to progress. Does everyone in an organization, can they progress? Boy, that one gets things down the line when people feel they can't progress in a company. So the role of managerial leadership in every organization is to make the organizational values operationally real. In other words, it's the role of the manager, the leader, the pastor to make the values real to the people. So the people understand the values and the people get buy in and take the values as their own. Now, the structure of an organization is the framework to divide its processes and activities in order to define its business operations. Right, a lot of words. So it's how we've laid the organization out, how we've set the organization out. And probably there's no two in the world that are quite set up the same. You've got to obviously lay your framework to what you're trying to do. There's a lot of things. And if you are wise, you lay your framework out according to your situation. Companies as well as churches need well-defined structures that list the leadership activities of who is responsible for which activity. Right, so that one is clear. And that one you could find definitely biblical fortification for that. You could find a biblical reinforcement that you need to define your structures, who is responsible for what activity in the church. So that's where we will overlap. In any business, you need to know who is king of what hill, who is responsible for what. Otherwise, you're just going to have trouble down the line. Organizational expectations. So in addition to structure, organizational expectations include an organization's expectations, experience, philosophy, values that hold it together. So what is the company expecting? What is we could take it for ourselves. What does a church expect? If we plant our flag in this suburb, on this street corner, what do we expect to encounter? What do we expect to be able to do about it, and so forth and so on? What do we expect? It is expressed in its self-image, inner workings, interactions with the outside world, interactions within it, and future expectations. All right, it's again, a lot of words, but how we behave reflects who we are. We can put it that way. And we can be judged by the outside world, how we behave, how we see ourselves, how we interact with each other, how we interact with the world. As you have loved one to another, so they shall know you are my disciples. So we don't have a problem with the church, in the church, with that kind of a statement. It's based on our shared attitudes, belief, customs, written and unwritten rules that become valid over time. As we behave towards each other, so the world will know us. Tree is known by its fruit. I'm trying to always bring one of these things back to the scriptures. Whilst a ministry is never a business. Now, that, brothers and sisters, has not stopped a ministry from being run like a business. Sadly, there are more than a few churches out there who use the for-profit model. It's just very sad in these times. A few folks running churches have made plenty profit, but a ministry should never be a business. But it needs to be run on a professional basis, much like a business. So there are many things in the church that have to be run like a business. But unfortunately, we are not a business. And sadly, a lot of churches, unfortunately, have and will be run like businesses. Some of the same fundamental truths that apply to a company also apply to a ministry. Just like everything else in life, you need a plan as well as a vision for your ministry. My people perish for lack of vision, says the scriptures. So the types of organizational structures, perhaps this is just more theoretical, but usually churches tend to be smaller structures, but you can have, for instance, like a head office. It's showing you a functional structure. They call it a flat structure, where every part of the organization is grouped according to its purpose. You have a research and development department, a production, a marketing, accounting, finance department. I'd say where Daniel and I work, this probably one fits the best. We've got all the different departments, and each department does its own thing. The downside is that coordination and communication between departments can be restrictive. It can be. Although in these day and age, between cell phones and emails, I mean, who really has to be isolated? Divisional structure is where each level reports upwards and each manager has a level of control. But there are types of divisional structures. There's a reason why we divide the structures up. There can be geography, like this one. It's based on different parts of the world. You have a head office somewhere, say in Europe, and then you've got the America branch and the Africa and the Asia and the Australia branch. Definitely many large organizations have to divide. You can have a product division, a product structure. I'm glad they've used more churchy examples, where we can have the church and the Bible college and the different missions in the church. You can do it according to customer base, where you have your head office, and then you have the different ministers and ministries ministering to people. I'd imagine many are hybrids of these. In reality, you've got to have a little bit of overlap, especially as an organization gets bigger. And now the one of productivity. That anything that operates must be productive, must produce something, whether it's for profit or non-profit. We have to produce something. After all, we're not preaching the gospel for the sake of the gospel's sake. We're preaching the gospel for the sake of winning people over. We're fishing for men. And in doing this, we need to have effectiveness and efficiency. Now, it says here these terms are used interchangeably, and they broke a few of them down for us. So we just look at them like effectiveness. Effectiveness is doing the right thing in terms of the action taken in order to achieve the intended outcome. So effectiveness is, are we doing the right thing? Is this the right way to do the thing? We would ask ourselves in the church, is this the right way to win hearts and souls for the gospel? Is it effective? Are our ministries effective? I know John Wesley was a big one for that, was, does the preacher get a reaction? Does the preacher get a response? Efficiency is a term rooted in manufacturing. It is a function of the time and energy needed to fulfill the tasks, efficiency. So are we putting in huge effort just to get one or two products? What effort are we putting in? Because in the secular world, that could be the difference between profitability or loss. If we're using huge resources to make one product and selling it at a loss, it's no good. So how efficient are we? And we need to be both effective and efficient, doing the right thing and doing the right things in the right way in order to be productive. It's a little catchphrase at the bottom. Now, in Proverbs 24, verse 3-4, it says, any enterprise which is built by wise planning becomes strong through common sense and profits wonderfully by keeping abreast of the facts, at least according to the Living Bible. So any enterprise which is built by wise planning becomes strong through common sense and profits wonderfully by keeping abreast of the facts. Wise planning implies that we ask God for his wisdom. By wise counsel you shall make your war, it says. So wise planning is not to operate in our own wisdom. We try to operate in godly wisdom. It means being thoughtful in the process, thinking through what we plan, not being impulsive, taking the time we need. Wise planning. And wisdom always needs a little humility. Doesn't really work. You always need a touch of humility with wisdom. The trick to being wise is never, brothers and sisters, to try and be too wise. Because that's when we get humility taught to us the wrong way. Common sense is lacking in many people, sad and true. It is the basic ability to perceive, understand, and judge things that are shared, that are common to nearly all people, or can be reasonably expected of nearly everyone. The old reasonable man can believe. A reasonable man can believe. Right? The basic ability to understand, perceive the world around us and act appropriately, like the average person can be expected to do. A little bit of common sense, sadly lacking in many people. Keeping abreast of the facts means good record keeping, keeping up to date with what's happening outside the organization, seeing how far we are in achieving our goals. It also means continuous assessment of where we are in relation to where we need to be. So to keep abreast of the facts, research before, after, see what's happening in the world, adjust our strategy. I think one of the first things when I joined the assembly, Dennis Solomon said, is we need to be culturally relevant but biblically pure. That's the balancing act the church needs to follow. Always biblically pure but culturally relevant, so that people can relate to us and we can give them the pure truth. A church, that's the balancing act the church is trying to pull off all the time. Be culturally relevant but remain biblically pure. So just want to go through some of the catchwords that people use. For instance, strategy. It's a method or a plan chosen to bring about a desired future, such as the achievement of the goal or a solution to a problem. Right, so it's a methodology, another large word. It's the plan we use to go about for the future. It's our strategy. Targets are indicators established to determine how successfully we are in achieving our goals. So we can set a target. Yeah, it's maybe a little harder in the church with that one, because we can't set really targets up. We want to save 100 souls this month. not quite relates, but targets what we want to achieve, what we want to go about. Our goals. Goals are indicators to determine whether we have achieved our objectives or our targets. So that's sort of like putting numbers to the target. If we say we want to manufacture 100 cars, then the goal is 100. They must be measurable and have time frames. Goals. Objectives are the sub-goals or the steps we take in reaching our goals. Now, what I've learned from work and what I brought in here is that targets, goals, and objectives that we set must be SMART. It's an acronym. I put it in the notes there. All targets, goals, and objectives must be SMART. Now, for probably everyone here knows it, but we'll go over it again. SMART means it must be simple to understand. It must be measurable. We must be able to measure it so you can know if you've got there or not. So simple, measurable to know if you've got there or not. What am I forgetting now? Attainable. Goals must be attainable, must not be unrealistic. We must not say we wish to open a crystal cathedral with 5 stories tall next month. It's not an obtainable goal. So they must be simple, measurable, obtainable, realistic, and time measurable. Must be able to measure them in time. So all targets, goals, and objectives must be SMART. Relationships of strategy to mission and vision. The relationship of strategy to mission and vision. Our mission is what we do. It is our ultimate objective. Our vision is how we do our mission. Our strategy is the plan we implement using our assets to achieve our objectives through effective goal setting. All right, it's quite a mouthful, but it's not a bad thing to write down. It's not a bad thing to know. It's what we do, what's our ultimate objective, how we're going to do our mission, and so forth. Right, components of a good strategy is our intent. We must be intent. Means we are intentional in what we're doing. We're deliberate, we're determined to meet our objectives. So we must be people of intent. We can't come half-hearted. We can't come sort of, we'll get there when we get there kind of thing. We must be intent. Our purpose, what we do, working from the end of our mission to the beginning, establishing the end in the beginning. That's a biblical concept, that the end is established in the beginning, that we know from the start where we're going, where we want to be. We establish the end in the beginning. The strategic triangle. It's just a concept, the relationship between us, our donors, and our beneficiaries. So what are we doing between those who are our benefactors, between those who are giving us the resources we need and those we are trying to help? What are we doing? What's the relationship between the three parties? Our strategic mission is the long-term plan we operate in order to achieve our mission and visions and objectives. So that's our long-term plan. Normally in just about every large company, they plan at least 5 years ahead, at least minimum. They foresee the future at least 5 years ahead, or they try to. And our strategic human resources, and that's what I just put in there, that the body has many parts. The Apostle Paul said, how we manage people according to the part of the body that they are. Brothers and sisters all have different gifts. They're different people made differently by God, how we arrange our body. So a good example of a mission and vision for the church is John Wesley's 5 imperatives, that basically he said many years ago when he got tired of predestination theology. He made the 5 imperatives that all men can be saved, all men should be saved, all men must be saved, all men can know that they are saved, and all men can be saved to the utmost. So that was just a little example of the church, of a mission and a vision that he had, that we can all be saved, we all should be saved, we all must be saved, we can all know that we are saved, and everyone can be sanctified to the utmost. So There, I just put it up for us, just once again to bring it more into the church setting, knowing what the mission and the vision of the church is, setting up all our different short, medium, long-term objectives, the current situation to know where we are now, both with ministry and with other things, the NPO norms, the non-profit organization, formulating the strategy and setting the objectives, implementing the objectives. Once we've set them, put them in, and then feedback and control. And may the Lord God show us his approval and make our efforts successful. Yes, make us successful. So, and actually I'm shooting ahead, but maybe we can work ahead. The 14 principles of management are based on the fundamental truths created by a scientist, Henri Fayol, who lived 1841 to 1925. So he's hardly current. I wouldn't say exactly say he's with the current affairs, Mr. Henry with an I, but they say these principles serve as a guideline still to this day, that these principles he put together. And some of them may apply to church, other ones maybe not so, but these are the 14 principles that he put together. The divisions of work. Employees are specialized in different areas and have different skills. Specialization promotes efficiency of the workforce and increases productivity. It's fine. We can bring it back to our biblical concept of the body as many different parts. That we all function for the good of the body, but the hand can't say to the foot now that you are wrong, and the foot fight with the hand and then have an argument with the eye and a falling out with the ear. It doesn't work like that. Making people that are good in a role, putting them in the role, that they work more efficiently, they are happier in their role. Otherwise, what you're going to end up with is a lot of staff turnover. And sadly, in church, we get a lot of things we call the periphery. A lot of people we see once or twice a year, or sometimes never again. The once or twices or the never agains is to find people a role and a niche in the church that everyone feels included. And it promotes efficiency, and it makes the workforce, increases productivity. So dividing people up into work that they are better at. Authority and responsibility. Oh boy. Something we really struggle with in this world. In order to get things done in an organization, management must have the authority to give orders to the employees. Yes, we understand that Christ is head of the church. No one argues. But here on earth, someone's got to be in charge, right? Any work site's got to have a foreman. It doesn't work another way. Yes, someone's got to bark the orders. And we've got to be led by somebody here in church. So someone's got to be the pastor. Someone's got to be in charge. Responsibility works the other way around. Comes back from performance. Is that people have to be responsible for the things they are given to do. First of all, we are all held responsible for our souls, the condition of our souls, and the work of our life that God holds us all responsible for. So we have to have leadership with the correct authority and people who take the correct responsibility. I suppose leaders too that take the correct responsibility. It's two sides of the same coin. So we have to have the right authority. Someone's got to be in charge, and everyone's got to be responsible. So that may be even a better way of putting it. Someone needs to be in charge, but everyone also has to be responsible. Discipline in the church. It's often part of the core values of a mission and vision in the form of good conduct and respectful interactions. Discipline. Today, it's a very scarce commodity. A lot of folks don't have much discipline, and a lot of bodies in authority aren't dishing out much discipline. And it needs to be part of the core values. The Bible says, let there be order in church meetings. All right? It's not a demolition derby, it's a church. All right? The point is not to destroy everything. The point is to build up. God says, I'm not a God of chaos. So we must be an ordered organization. There must be discipline. And we must have good and respectful conduct, or it's just never going to work. We're going to be judged by our fruit, and we won't convert anyone. And those we do convert will fall away. Unity of command. An individual employee should receive orders from one manager, and in turn, the employee is answerable to that manager. If the task and related responsibilities are given to the employee by more than one manager, this may lead to confusion. Perhaps this one not the most compatible, because the Lord Jesus did say, you know, to be the greatest, you must be slave to all. So maybe, depends how you want to go about splitting your hair, if you want to split your hair from the top or split your hair from the bottom. But definitely in a normal business organization, everybody's got to have one boss. Definitely in the secular world, whether you can argue or not whether it applies to the church, but in the secular world, in a company, everybody's going to have one boss. You've got more than one person giving someone orders, you're going to have a disaster on your hands. You're going to have chaos. It'll do more than lead to confusion, it'll lead to bankruptcy. So an individual employee in a business must have one manager. Unity of direction absolutely applies to the church. It's all about our focus. All employees deliver activities that can be linked to the same objective. So although the body has many parts, the body must go in one direction. You can't have the hand go left and the one foot go right, and the brain think about its own thing. It doesn't work. We must, in the church, have unity of direction. We must all work. We all work for the glory of God and the kingdom of heaven. And we must make it more specific than that. We can't just be general. All activities must be carried out by one group that forms a team. Yes, the church must ultimately form one team. And these activities must be described in a plan of action. My people perish for lack of vision. We must have a plan. And our plan must be to keep the gospel pure and to teach a pure as possible gospel. Subordination of individual interest absolutely applies. Because when Paul was speaking about, it's no longer I that liveth, but Christ that liveth in me. In order to have an organization function well, personal interests must be subordinate to organizational interests. Absolutely 300 trillion million% applies to the church. We need less I that liveth and more Christ that liveth in me to function properly as a church. We must tone down where we need to the individual interest. Remuneration. I'm always going to run you into a little Luke 3 verse 17 on that one. Be ye content with your wages. But definitely in a secular organization, motivation and productivity are close to one another as far as the smooth running of an organization is concerned. So remuneration should be sufficient to keep employees motivated and productive. Yes, folks, you're going to pay peanuts, you're going to collect monkeys. That's what they say in the world. Unfortunately, today, many companies are experts at paying people just enough to keep them interested. Unfortunately, it's a well-mastered art form. Many companies are very good at, they give you just enough to keep you from walking out the door. And we don't do it for the money in the church. As I say, we sort of collide with Luke 3 verse 17 there, but definitely you're running a company. If you don't want monkeys, don't pay peanuts. The degree of centralization, management and authority for the decision-making process must be properly balanced in an organization. This depends on the volume and size, including the hierarchy. An organization must always strive for a good balance. It's a lot of words to say you must lay out your framework according to the needs that you're in. That every branch, division, every department must be laid out, staffed, and set up according to its individual specific needs. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. I think we actually covered that in an earlier point. I did notice that some of these points are very repetitive. I really try to break them up, brothers and sisters, these points, laying them out differently, throwing a few pictures in, because Really, honestly, some of the stuff is repetitious and eventually it all just boils into one. The scalar chain. There should be a clear line in the chain of authority from the top to the bottom and applies to all managers at all levels. All right, so basically saying is the chain of command must be something you can follow. You must be able to follow the chain of command in a company. Definitely without chain of command, Christ is the head of the church. So that's fine, and I think that will be in the theological statement of every church. But once we go down from Christ, we must be able to understand who fits where in the chain of authority. It goes from who to who to who. You know, who overrides who gives orders to who. It must not be a mess. It must not be a disaster, people tripping over each other, fighting with each other, claiming to have authority over the same thing. There must be a chain of command in any organization, church included, that we can follow. Order. Employees in an organization must have the right resources at their disposal so they can function properly in an organization. In addition to social order, the work environment must be safe, clean, and tidy. Yes, God is not a God of chaos. Let there be order in church meetings, but in addition, let there be cleanliness, safetyness, and tidiness. Cleanliness being next to godliness. I know it's not a biblical phrase, but it's still a true phrase. And yes, the church must also look clean, neat, respectable. Someone's got to sweep the floor. Someone's got to dust the surfaces. Let the place be clean. Let the place be tidy. Let it also be safe. Not the ceilings falling down and the wiring sparking and so forth. And this and that overflowing. We must have a safe, clean, and tidy environment that people want to come to. Equity. Employees must be treated kindly and equally. Yes, everyone must be treated kindly and equally, and we must be civil, polite, and respectful to one another. Once again, as we have loved one to another, so they shall know you are my disciples. Absolutely applies to the church. Stability of tenure of personnel. Big one, Brother Daniel will say so as well. Our company has moaned in the past about staff turnover. That people were ill-fitted to their positions. They get tired, demoralized, they get disgruntled, and they leave. So we must also strive to meet the needs of the people, to build the people up, that we don't have the once a years and the once and never seen againers. I know we're not doing it for the same reasons as a private company, but let's try and hold on to the people. Initiative. Employees should be allowed to express new ideas. Absolutely, new ideas. But just remember, we have a quality control department that's kept in that book. That's a collection of 66 books. We just have all new ideas must be biblically compatible. We have no problem with initiative. You can think up anything you like and bring in any new idea you like. As long as you can defend it from scripture, definitely no problem there. All right, somebody here with his French, l'esprit de corps. Management must strive for the involvement and unity of all employees, as well as a culture of mutual trust and understanding. Don't have a problem with that. Try and involve everyone. Must not be cliquey and leave people out. Give everybody a chance in the church. Try and encourage and include. The 5 functions of management. Henri Fayol created the first principles of management theory and is classified in as the founding father of line and staff organization. Okay, well done to Henry. And he distinguished 6 general activities, industrial and for industrial enterprises, technical, commercial, financial, security, accounting, and managerial. And he defined the 5 functions of management. And these are still seen as relevant to organizations today. The 5 functions focus on the relationship between personnel and its management, and they provide points of reference so that problems can be solved in a creative manner. Okay, hooray for Henry, and let's look at some of the things Henry came up with. He spoke about planning. Planning is looking ahead. Drawing up a good plan is the hardest of the 5 functions. It needs the active participation of the entire organization. Together with a time frame, it must be linked and coordinated on different levels. That's fine. Let's have a plan. Let's have a time frame. No problem. The church can be run that way. And we must take into account our organization's resources and flexibility. Not a problem. Organizing. Organizations only function well if well organized. There must be sufficient capital, staff, and raw materials for the smooth running and good working structure. The organization structure with a good division of functions is crucial. So again, the body must be properly organized. The different people must be put into ministries where they function, thrive, and want to be. Maybe not so much want to be, but at least where they function and strive. And that way we can expand and grow both horizontally and vertically. Commanding, when giving orders, clear working instructions. All right, so orders must be simple, orders must be clear, working instructions, and people must know exactly what's required of them. Okay, all employees, the return is optimized if they're given proper instructions. Successful managers have integrity and they communicate clearly and base their decisions on regular audits. We've got no problem with that. They're capable of motivating and encouraging employees to take the initiative. Absolutely, and so they should. And so we can too in the church. To coordinate, it says when all activities are harmonized, the organization will function better. Yes, when the body's properly sorted out, when ministries are properly created, established, the organization will be harmoniously, and it aims to stimulate motivation and discipline within group dynamics. Perfect. I have no problems with that. And only through positive employee behavior can management achieve the intended objectives. Controlling is verified whether everything is going according to plan. The organization must know if the activities are carried out in accordance with the plan. So, to control, to set up proper quality control, we need to establish what the standards are. So we establish our standards. We measure and report on the actual performance. And I think there we can say, folks, we must be honest and brave to accept fair criticism, whether it is good or bad. If someone teaches, someone must be open to questions and feedback. Take corrective or preventative measures where needed. Again, that speaks to maturity and courage. We must be prepared to be corrected when correction is fair. Each of these steps is about solving problems in a creative manner. Finding a creative solution is often more difficult than discovering what the problem is, and that is true enough. All right, so these, I believe, are coming up to the last 14. It speaks about leading a successful team. You should serve others before you serve yourself. Definitely, the Bible has no problem with that concept. The servant leader is when we study in year 1, being the servant leader. If you lead a team, your job is to help your people succeed and achieve their goals. But like many other skills, sorry, I left out the S, you have to work on it. Right, it's not a skill. The servant leader is not a thing that comes naturally. So, I believe this is 1 of 14. Make your people feel safe. Right, the church must be a safe environment for people. People need to know that they can grow from their failures. It creates a higher level of trust and cooperation. When the leader sacrifices himself to protect and improve his people, they are willing to move mountains for him. So there's absolutely true. People need to feel safe. People need to feel unthreatened in a church. And definitely some folks have left churches because they feel the other people in the church feel better than, think they're better than them. Changing your mind. Even the smartest people get things wrong. What makes a good leader is the ability to admit it and change course. Many politicians, leaders won't, even if it's the right choice. They don't want to seem weak or they are prideful. right? They'd rather pull rank than admit being wrong. Admitting wrong requires much strength. So, folks, we need to admit when we're wrong. That comes down to basic maturity. And we need to move on, and we need to change course where we have to change course. Team bonding. Effective team bonding stems from connecting on a personal level. Sharing positive social experiences is the best way to develop trust within a team. It triggers the release of oxytocin, a hormone that helps us empathize with others. It prompts us to help relate and care about others like we do for our family. Genuine conversations about your team's passions will break down barriers and create. And I left out. I think I was supposed to say trust. Trust is needed for your team so they will passionately support your overall purpose. So people need to bond. We need to love each other in the church. It's a church. It's not a demolition derby. We need to love and effectively bond with each other. Empathy. Empathy is being able to understand and share the feelings of others. Every good leader should be empathetic, but the higher you climb the ladder, the harder it gets to be empathetic. Yes, I think that's very true in the church. Should be an empath. Every church leader should be an empath. Unfortunately, in the world, we seem to have that opposite character trait. The more narcissistic character trait tends to be found more often in the world in leadership. But we need to be empathetic. We need to be able to empathize with people. The church, in many ways, it's a hospital for the soul. And we need to be the doctors and nurses that help people with their problems. Challenge your team. Push your team to perform to its best. Everyone on your team can level up to help them enhance their work ethic and skill sets. Push them to reach their potential and let them handle their own projects. So yes, everybody in the church, we all need to strive for perfection. We all need to strive to be better leaders and better followers. We can all lift our game. So definitely we all need to be challenged. Emotions. Don't allow emotions to influence your decisions. Great leaders do what is right, even if it causes emotional pain. When you need to give constructive criticism, even if you don't want to hurt, tell them what they need to hear. You could put there in brackets next to that one, the prophetic ministry. Tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Don't be one of those raised up teachers to tickle ears. Tell them what they want to hear. Sound doctrine. Great leaders blast through any discomfort and do what is best for their team. And great church leaders do what is best for their church. Transparency. Great leaders trust their people, especially with information. They know their team can sense problems. Now, I got the impression, they was speaking about, if you read the whole thing, speaks about keeping things under wraps will make your team feel anxious if they know their leader is withholding. I just got the feeling with this point that we're speaking about when there are problems, don't withhold if there's a problem. But I think this one, I must be careful. There is such a thing as confidentiality as well. So I'll just, with respect, say this one needed a bit of qualification. Acknowledgement and acknowledge and appreciate employees. Yes, make your team feel valued. It's one of the most important emotional needs. And when people do good, they need to be recognized. Make them feel important and happier. Incentivize them to keep improving. Recognize and reward your employees for accomplishments. Do it in front of peers and one-on-one. It's also a way to inspire other members to improve and earn recognition. Just, we don't do it for the accolades, at least not the accolades on earth. So one little thing, we won't be 100% compatible in the church with this point. I also noticed as these 14 points carried on, he started writing a lot. Whoever was the author here, and he got more concise. I eventually could put 3 points in a slide. But he gets a bit more concise. He says, be decisive. Maybe he took his own advice. Sometimes you will be wrong. That's life. Don't delay the decision-making process. If you are indecisive, your team will be insecure about your decisions. All right, so let us be decisive. Let's do. Right, goes back to intent. Let's be a people of intent. Let's do things. Let's go. Let's commit to a plan. Don't sit and hold back forever, because it's the best way for nothing to get done. Manage conflict. Don't allow unresolved conflict. It's like cancer. Encourage the parties to work it out. Take Paul's example and confront Peter face to face if you must. Step in if a resolution cannot be found, and try not to take sides, although sometimes you'll have to. Right? So we manage conflict. We don't avoid conflict. We don't sweep conflict away. Manage the conflict. Sorry about the missing A. I only saw it now. Set a good example. Lead well by setting the example you want employees to follow. Paul said, mimic me as I mimic Christ. Got no problem. Set the example. If you're always late, they will always be late. If you do whatever you do wrong or right, they will follow. So set the example. Be the example. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. Be the example. Communication. Your team should know exactly what they must do. Involve them in the decision making. Ask for ideas. They should always be kept up to date with what is happening. Set goals in conjunction with your team. Yes, confidentiality when necessary aside, people must know. The church's vision and the church's mission must never be classified. Right? We're not running MI6, we're running a church. There's no need to classify the vision and the mission and the goals. Let the people know what they're doing, that people can buy in and people can work towards the goals. Allow team members to do their jobs. Step back and allow people to do what they know to do. Don't be in their faces the whole time. Allow them to make mistakes. Trust them. Don't micromanage. It's fair enough. Let people do. If you give someone a ministry, let them do the ministry. Don't micromanage the thing for them. Allow people to make mistakes. Correct mistakes when they need to be corrected. And the last point you got here is make it fun. Work should be fun, not a drag or a place of intimidation. Work hard, but enjoy it. Yes, I do believe there is a time and a place, because Ecclesiastes says there is a time to laugh. In chapter 3, there is a time, and the church can be a place of joy. There's enough misery in the world, folks. We don't have to let the people come in here and have another slice of misery. There's enough misery in the world, brothers and sisters.